The screech of a tile saw cut through the thin pine air, freezing me at the threshold. On the kitchen island, a blueprint with a strange logo read, "Primary Suite, Pink Haven Style." My father leaned against the doorframe, smirking. "Just in time. I'm turning this into Brielle's new home." The cold smell of grout dust and the glare of vanity lights felt like my own memories being scraped away. In that instant, I knew. They weren't just borrowing boundaries, they were erasing them. My name is Camilla Lawrence. I am 34 years old. By day, I am the Chief Operating Officer at Northbridge Analytics, a forensic accounting firm based in Seattle. My entire professional life is dedicated to finding the narrative hidden within the numbers. I hunt for the fraud, the embezzlement, the sophisticated lies buried in impenetrable spreadsheets and offshore shell companies. It requires a specific kind of stillness, an obsessive focus on detail, an ability to sift through emotional chaos for the one, hard, verifiable fact. That stillness is difficult to maintain in the city. The city is relentless noise, which is why I have the cabin. The 2-hour drive from Seattle to the Olympic Peninsula is my decompression protocol. Past the Bremerton Ferry, beyond the strip malls, the cell signal begins to drop. The city's static fades, replaced by the damp, heavy green of the temperate Ramaite rainforest. I had left the office at exactly 2 p.m., navigating the Friday afternoon crawl, my overnight bag on the passenger seat. All I craved was the sharp scent of cedar, the percussive sound of the Hood Canal lapping at the shore, and 2 full days, 48 hours, where no one needed anything from me. I visualized the weekend as the highway miles disappeared, waking up to the gray, watery light filtering through the tall pines, the worn flannel sheets I kept in the dryer, the rough, satisfying slate floor of the master shower I had designed myself. This cabin was a space built on natural materials, a direct and intentional counterpoint to the glass and steel penthouse I owned in Seattle. The penthouse was an asset, a vertical box in the sky. This cabin was my sanctuary. It was the only place on earth where I held an absolute, undisputed boundary. I turned off the main highway onto the long gravel road, the tires crunching reassuringly over the rock, but the quiet was wrong. The air wasn't still. I heard it before I saw the truck, the high, invasive, mechanical whine of a power tool, a tile saw. My stomach clenched. I rounded the final bend, parked in my driveway. Blocking the path was a white utility truck, the logo on the side. Harborline Build Co. was completely unfamiliar. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. A dull, panicked beat. Had a tree fallen? Was it an emergency repair? I parked behind the truck and got out. The saw stopped, and for a moment, the only sound was the wind. Then, a radio clicked on, loud and booming, playing generic pop music that echoed unnaturally through the trees. I walked to the front door, a heavy slab of solid oak. It was unlocked. Not just unlocked, but slightly ajar, resting against the jamb. This was impossible. I am meticulous about security. The locks were new. The system was state-of-the-art. I approached the door and saw the glint of metal still in the deadbolt. A key. It was the spare key I had given my mother, Diane, 2 years ago, after 6 months of relentless, guilt-laced requests, just for emergencies. "Camilla, what if a pipe bursts? What if there's a fire? It's just sensible, darling." The whine of the saw shrieked to life again, originating from the back of the cabin, from my wing, my bedroom, my bathroom. I pushed the door open. The smell hit me first. Not pine and damp earth and wood smoke. It was chemical, sharp, and dusty. It was the sterile, alkaline smell of drywall compound and latex primer. A fine, pervasive layer of white dust covered everything. It coated the dark, reclaimed Douglas fir floors I had spent 6 months sourcing from a defunct Oregon barn. It filmed the surface of the basalt countertop on the kitchen island. My boots left clean, stark footprints in the powdery residue. It felt like walking through ash. It felt like sacrilege. The saw shrieked again, cutting through the music. I followed the sound, my weekend bag still hanging heavy on my shoulder, my knuckles white on the strap. On the kitchen island, taped directly over my carefully curated cookbooks, was a rolled-out blueprint. The logo read, Harborline Build Co., but the title block underneath was worse. Primary Suite, Pink Haven Style. Just in time. My father, Martin Lawrence, leaned against the doorframe of the hallway that led to the master suite. He was wearing pristine jeans and a polo shirt, holding a coffee mug from my cabinet as if he were a visitor at an open house, not an intruder. He smirked, that familiar, indulgent expression that always preceded an unreasonable request or a boundary violation. "I'm turning this into Brielle's new home," he announced, gesturing with the mug. "A little housewarming gift." The cold, mineral smell of grout dust mixed with the chemical sweetness of fresh paint. From the hallway behind him, a new, blindingly white light glared, replacing the warm, recessed halogens I had specified. The harsh light, the dust, the noise, it felt like my own memories, my own peace, were being systematically scraped away. They weren't just borrowing boundaries, they were erasing them. I brushed past him without a word. He didn't try to stop me. The hallway floor was covered in gray ramboard, the walls splattered with joint compound. My bathroom was gone. It was utterly, completely unrecognizable. I had designed it as a refuge, dark slate floors, a deep Japanese soaking tub made of hinoki wood, a simple, ceiling-mounted rain shower head. It was meant to smell like cedar and steam. Now, it was a horror show of glossy, white marble-veined porcelain tile. The crew, 2 men I didn't recognize, both frozen in mild panic at my sudden appearance, had just finished installing a gaudy gold-plated clawfoot tub directly in the center of the room, where my beloved hinoki tub had been. There were just raw, open pipes jutting from the floor. They had ripped out the custom-milled walnut vanity. In its place, thick electrical wires hung from the wall, ready for a fixture that matched the new mirror leaning against the wall, a massive, frameless rectangle bordered by harsh, daylight-bright LED strips. "The tile is Italian," my father offered from the doorway, as if that were the point. "Top of the line. Brielle picked it out." I didn't answer him. My gaze was fixed on the open wall cavity, the exposed studs, the sloppy wiring. I walked past the destroyed bathroom, my feet crunching on tile spacers, and into the bedroom. The quiet corner where I kept my meditation cushion, the corner that overlooked the dense forest of ferns and firs, was gone. The window was still there, but the space was now dominated by a massive, built-in white vanity table, complete with a triptych of mirrors framed in oversized Hollywood-style globe lights. And the walls? My God, the walls. They had covered the warm, textured, hand-troweled plaster with a flat, nauseating, saccharin powder pink wallpaper. "Brielle picked the color scheme," Martin said again, still following me, still narrating the violation. "It's what everyone is doing on social media. Very bright, very happy. It'll be perfect for her and the kids." "She doesn't live here," I said. My voice was dangerously quiet, a low vibration I barely recognized. "Don't be dramatic, Camilla," he sighed, the manufactured patience in his tone setting my teeth on edge. "You have that massive penthouse in Seattle. You barely use this place. You're never here. Brielle and her family need a fresh start, a real home. Family helps family." The penthouse, the eternal justification. I bought that property as a sterile investment, a box of glass and air. This place, this cabin, I bought with my own money, cash, after my first major partner-level payout. It was mine. The deed was in my name, and my name alone. I ignored him. My shock, the hot, blinding flush of rage, was already receding. It was being replaced by something colder, sharper, and far more useful. The COO took over. The forensic accountant started collecting data. I turned around and walked back to the kitchen, past the stunned contractors who were now trying to look busy, avoiding my eyes. I looked at the blueprint again. Pink Haven style. I went back outside. The air was cold and clean, and I took a deep breath, clearing the chemical fog from my lungs. On the gravel driveway, next to the Harbor Line truck, was a small, temporary sign stuck in the mud. Harbor Line Build Co., licensed, bonded, insured. Taped to the inside of the front window, obscured by the construction dust, was the building permit. I pulled out my phone. My hands were perfectly steady. I took a high-resolution photograph of the permit, filling the frame. I zoomed in on the text. Contractor, Harbor Line Build Co. Permit number, I memorized it instantly, 5499B. Client owner, Lawrence Family Renewal, LLC. My blood went cold. Lawrence Family Renewal, an LLC I had never heard of, an LLC that was clearly fraudulently claiming ownership of my property to secure a building permit. I stepped back and took a wide-angle photo of the entire front of the cabin, capturing the permit in the window, the truck in the drive, and the open, violated door. I took a close-up of the contractor's sign and his license plate. I went back inside. My father was pouring himself another cup of coffee from my machine. The picture of casual ownership. I switched my phone from camera to video record, shielding the screen with my hand. I hit the red button. Dad, I said, my voice perfectly even, almost conversational. I want to be perfectly clear about what you just said. What is this construction for? He smiled, expansive, triumphant. It's a gift, Camila, a new home for your sister. She's so excited. She's finally going to have the space she deserves, away from that tiny apartment. A gift, I repeated, holding the phone steady. You are gifting my home to Brielle. It's a family asset, he stressed, the smile tightening at my tone. It's been sitting here, wasted. You have plenty. It's time you shared. It's what your mother would have wanted. I stopped recording and saved the file to my secure cloud. I looked at the two contractors, who were now pointedly cleaning tools in the ruined bathroom, trying to ignore the confrontation. Who is the site supervisor? The older one, a man with graying hair and grout smeared on his jeans, wiped his hands on a rag. That'd be me, Frank. Look, miss, we were just... I held up a hand. Frank, I'm Camilla Lawrence. I am the sole owner of this property. You are trespassing. His face went pale, then flushed red. What? No, Mr. Lawrence here. He hired us. He said he was the owner, that this was a family renewal project. He lied. I looked up the Harbor Line Build Co. number from the sign I'd photographed. I dialed it. My back was to my father. A man answered on the second ring, sounding rushed. Harbor Line? I'm looking for the owner or the head project manager. This is Dave. I'm the owner. Who's this? My name is Camilla Lawrence. I am the owner of the property at 1412 Salish Point Road. Your crew is currently on my property conducting unauthorized demolition and construction. There was a dead, heavy silence on the line. What? That's impossible, he sputtered. We have a signed contract. We have a permit. We met with the owner, Martin Lawrence, and his daughter Brielle. We have a check from the Lawrence Family Renewal, LLC. You have a permit filed under a fraudulent entity, I said, my voice as flat and hard as steel. I am the owner of record. You can verify that with the county assessor's office in 30 seconds. I am ordering an immediate stop work. You and your crew are to vacate my property immediately. Now, wait a minute, lady. There are no minutes, I cut him off. You have 10 seconds to call your site supervisor, Frank, and confirm my order, or my next call is to the Sheriff's Department for criminal trespass and the State Licensing Board for gross negligence. I heard him fumbling with another phone, his breathing heavy. Frank, he yelled, his voice muffled, away from the receiver. Frank, pack it up. Pack it all up right now. We're leaving. Get off the site. The men in the bathroom began scrambling, throwing tools into buckets with a loud metallic clatter. We'll sue you for breach of contract, the owner yelled back into the phone at me. Good luck suing a non-existent client, I said. You'll be hearing from my attorney. I hung up. The The contractors were practically running out of the house, their faces a mixture of confusion and anger. Frank shot a venomous look at my father as he passed. The front door slammed shut. The radio was off. The saw was silent. The silence was absolute, heavier and more oppressive than the noise had been. "What in the hell do you think you're doing?" My father's voice was low, vibrating with a rage I knew well. The genial, expansive host was gone. "You don't talk to people like that. You just humiliated me. You embarrassed this family." "You are destroying my home," I said, finally turning to face him. The white dust on the floor seemed to glow in the silence. "It's just stuff. Camilla, it's wood and stone. This is your family. Your sister. She has nothing. You've become so cold, so callous. All this money, this big COO title. It's made you selfish. It's poison." He was shouting now, the old familiar script. Any boundary I set was callous. Any possession I held was selfish. My success, the success he endlessly bragged about to his friends, was only valid as a communal resource for him to distribute as he saw fit. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't engage. The forensic accountant had all the data she needed for the initial report. The COO had contained the immediate damage. I walked past him to the front door and locked the deadbolt. I watched the Harbor Line truck spin gravel as it sped away down the long drive. "I'm not arguing with you, Dad," I said, looking out at the trees, my back to him. "You're damn right you're not. You're going to call that man back and apologize." "Tomorrow," I interrupted, my voice flat, final, and absolute. "Everything stops." My father left an hour later, slamming the oak door so hard I felt the vibration through the floorboards. The silence he left behind was thick with the alkaline smell of drywall dust and the lingering, synthetic sweetness of pink primer. I stood in the center of my desecrated living room, the fine white powder coating my boots. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't an impulsive mistake. This was a premeditated, calculated, and funded operation. This was the endgame of a war of attrition I had been losing for 15 years. My family operates on a simple, unspoken charter. What is mine is theirs. My success is not my own. It is a communal resource, a family asset, to be distributed according to their needs, their whims, and their spectacular lack of judgment. It started when I was in college, at Wharton, when I got my internship at a Big Four accounting firm. My father, Martin, immediately told his golf buddies I was running the department when I received my signing bonus, a modest $5,000 that felt like a fortune. He'd already mentally spent it on a new set of titanium drivers. "We're a team, Camilla," he'd say, ruffling my hair. "We all pull together, but only I was pulling. Everyone else was just taking." Then came the crash. Not just the 2008 crash that shook the world, but the specific, localized Martin Lawrence crash that vaporized my parents' retirement, their portfolio, and the equity in our childhood home. Martin had always fancied himself a small-time real estate mogul, a visionary. In reality, he was a gambler who over-leveraged himself on speculative properties, convinced he was the next big thing. When the music stopped, he was left holding nothing but bad debt and a stack of foreclosure notices. I was 24. I had just made junior analyst. I was working 80-hour weeks, my entire life revolving around spreadsheets that detailed the financial ruin of companies far larger than my father's. I came home one weekend to find my mother, Diane, chain-smoking at the kitchen table, a banker's box full of unopened, red-stamped envelopes beside her. They were 3 days from a sheriff's auction. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I got to work. I took the box. I opened my laptop, and I did what I do best. I became a forensic accountant for my own family. It took me 48 hours, fueled by black coffee and cold rage, to build the spreadsheet that explained their life, the hidden credit cards, the bridge loan from a shark, the second mortgage I knew nothing about. I bailed them out, but not in the way they wanted. They expected me to liquidate my meager 401k and hand them a check. I did not. I went to my managing partner, explained a family emergency, and secured a personal line of credit against my future earnings, a move that professionally indentured me for the next 5 years. With that capital, I didn't pay off my father's bad bets. I negotiated them. I settled the debts for pennies on the dollar, restructured the primary mortgage, and cut off the financial bleeding. In return, I took control. I set up a fixed, unchangeable allowance for both of them, paid directly into a checking account I monitored. I took away my father's checkbooks. I put my mother in charge of the household budget, with a strict ledger system. My father never forgave me for the humiliation. My mother never forgave me for the burden of responsibility. And I never forgave them for forcing me to become my parents' parent. This action set the template for our entire relationship. I was no longer just a daughter. I was the insurance policy, the cold, logical, unfun provider. And they, in turn, felt entitled to my success because they saw it as compensation for the indignity of my control. My siblings are just echoes of this dysfunction, each with their own particular brand of parasitic entitlement. My brother, Grant, is the ideas guy. He's a serial startup founder, which is a polite way of saying he's serially unemployed. He drifts from one failed venture to the next, a blockchain for artisanal coffee, a social media app for dog walkers, a subscription box for bespoke. Something. Each one required seed funding, which he believed was my obligation to provide. He views my career at Northbridge not as something I built, but as a venture capital fund he should have free access to. My refusal to fund his latest doomed enterprise wasn't seen as a sound financial decision, but as a personal betrayal, a sister hoarding the family's luck. And then there is Brielle, my younger sister. The Pink Haven style in my bathroom was her signature. Brielle lives in a curated, rose gold-filtered reality. Addicted to the validation of strangers on social media, she is a vortex of emotional and financial need, a black hole of poor decisions dressed up in influencer aesthetics. She weaponizes her own fragility, constantly spinning narratives of victimhood to extract money, sympathy, and most of all, concessions. Her conversations are a masterclass in emotional manipulation, designed to make you feel guilty for having what she believes she deserves. She had, for years, been lamenting her cramped apartment, insinuating that my penthouse, and especially my cabin, were an unfair distribution of family resources. My mother, Diane, is the ecosystem that allows them all to thrive. She is the professional peacemaker, the enabler-in-chief. Her greatest fear is conflict. She will do anything, say anything, and sacrifice anyone to avoid a raised voice. Her solution to every family problem was to push me, the stable one, to concede. Just give Grant the money for this one. Camila, it'll make him happy. Brielle's heart is broken. Just let her use the cabin for the summer. Your father is so proud. Don't humiliate him over a few dollars. Her quest for peace was always at the expense of my boundaries. She was the one who'd asked for the spare key. For emergencies, darling, I had refused for a year, but she was relentless. She cried. She said I didn't trust her. She said I was locking her out of my life, just like I'd locked them out of my finances. Finally, foolishly, I gave in. One key, for emergencies only, a small favor. My life had become a death by 1,000 small favors. The small favors accumulated, hardening over time into rigid default expectations. My boundaries were constantly being tested, nudged, and then, when I wasn't looking, brazenly crossed. Standing there in the dust, I understood. This was the final, logical escalation. They weren't just pushing the boundary, they were trying to redraw it, to take this cabin, my one inviolable space, and absorb it into the communal Lawrence family asset pool. I knew then, with a chilling, absolute clarity, that if I let this stand, I would lose everything. Not just the cabin, my career, my peace, my future. It would all be swallowed whole by their relentless, insatiable need. This was not a family dispute. This was a hostile takeover, and I would treat it as such. It's why I hired Miles Ortega 2 years ago. After a particularly ugly fight with Grant over my refusal to co-sign a business loan, I realized my legal and financial firewalls were insufficient. I didn't need a family lawyer who would talk about mediation and understanding. I needed a litigator. Miles Ortega is a man who specializes in complex real estate fraud and high-conflict partnership dissolutions. He's quiet, expensive, and utterly ruthless. He has a shark stillness. When I first met him, I presented him with a full forensic workup of my family's financial dynamics, complete with flowcharts. He didn't blink. He simply said, "We need to insulate your assets, now." He was the one who structured the purchase of this cabin. He reviewed every line of the title report. He advised me, strenuously, to purchase it under my own name, directly, not in an LLC, not in a trust that my family could somehow try to attach or dispute. "Let's keep it simple," he'd said. "Clean title, sole ownership, Camila Lawrence. It's the strongest position. Any move against it won't be a complex civil matter. It will be a simple, blatant, criminal one." I looked at the blueprint on my counter. Lawrence Family Renewal, LLC. They had tried to be sophisticated. They had created a shell company to make it look like a legitimate transaction to the contractor. But the property itself was in my name, Camila Lawrence. This wasn't just a trespass. It was a blatant, clumsy, and deeply personal act of fraud. And they were going to learn, finally, what it meant to cross a line I was willing to defend. The silence in the cabin was a vacuum, magnifying the scrape of my boot on the dusty floor. My father was gone, but the violation remained. The shock had burned off, leaving behind the cold, familiar hum of professional focus. This was no longer my sanctuary. It was a scene. It was a file, my file. I began where the intrusion did, the front door. I ran my fingers over the lock set. It was a high-end, pick-resistant deadbolt. The finish was unscratched. The jamb was intact. There was no sign of prying, no gouges in the wood, no indication of forced entry. It was exactly as I feared. They had used Diane's key, the key my mother had wept for, sworn was only for a flood or a fire, the one small favor that had unlocked the entire fortress. This was the point of entry, not a break-in, but a betrayal. I documented it, a close-up photo of the immaculate lock, a photo of the keyway, a note, entry via spare key, provided to Diane Lawrence. Next, the damage. I walked back to the master suite, my footsteps precise in the white powder. The contractors had left in a hurry, their tools and debris scattered. It was sloppy, and sloppy work leaves a trail. My eyes went to the new vanity mirror, the one with the garish Hollywood globe lights. A fixture like that, with that many bulbs, would draw a significant amount of power. I went to the utility closet in the hallway. The air inside smelled of new plastic and ozone. I opened the door to the breaker panel. My original panel was a model of clean organization, each breaker meticulously labeled in my own handwriting. Now, there was a new addition that screamed incompetence. A bright white, 60-amp, double-pole breaker sat starkly against the older gray ones. Wires, thick and poorly routed, snaked from it, disappearing into the wall toward my bedroom. A 60-amp breaker for a vanity. It was ludicrous, a fire hazard in the waiting. I leaned in closer. The new wiring, a heavy-gauge Romex, had been fed through the panel's knockout, but the installer hadn't used a proper cable clamp. The raw edge of the metal panel was cutting directly into the plastic sheathing of the wire. It was a clear, unambiguous violation of the National Electrical Code, Section 334.30. My phone came out. Click, a close-up of the breaker. Click, a macro shot of the wire sheathing being sliced by the panel edge. This wasn't just bad work. It was gross negligence. Harborline Buildco had just handed me my first piece of leverage against them. I returned to the kitchen, to the epicenter of the fraud. The paperwork left on my island, the blueprints, the permit, the contractor's folder. I spread them out under the kitchen light, my hands perfectly steady. I started with the permit application. It was a printout from the county's online portal. I scanned past the parcel number, the contractor's license, and went straight to the owner authorization. And there it was, a digital signature. Camilla L. I stared at it. I have never, in my entire 34 years, signed anything Camilla L., my legal signature, the one on my passport, my driver's license, my Northbridge partnership agreements, is Camilla Ann Lawrence. This clumsy, informal forgery was an amateur's mistake. It was the kind of detail a person who only calls me Camilla would overlook. This was forgery. This was the predicate act. I photographed the signature block. I photographed the entire permit page. Next, I examined the contractor's onboarding packet. Harborline had left their entire client folder. Inside, under a tab labeled Funding Draws, was a progress chart. It detailed a 4-draw schedule. The first draw, for demolition and materials, had already been paid. The source of funds was listed next to it. HELOC. Act. No. Ending in 9021. My blood ran cold. A home equity line of credit, a loan, secured against the value of my property, a loan I had not authorized, had never applied for, did not know existed. They hadn't just used their own money, or Martin's, or Grant's. They had stolen my identity, leveraged my own asset, and forced me to pay for my own violation. The rage that sparked in my chest was so cold it almost burned. This elevated the entire event from a family squabble to a federal crime, bank fraud, identity theft. I didn't pause. I kept digging. In the same folder, I found the invoices. The top one was from Pink Haven Interiors, LLC, Brielle's friend. The invoice was for initial design consultation and mood board services. The amount was staggering. It was more than 20% of the entire quoted construction budget, an absurd, indefensible fee. I knew exactly what I was looking at. This was a kickback. This was how Brielle was siphoning money from the fraudulent loan, paying her friend, who would then, undoubtedly, split the cash with her. It was a classic, clumsy, self-dealing scheme. But how did they get the loan? How did they sign the permit? Even with a forged digital signature, a loan of that size would require notarized documents. I found it at the bottom of the stack, under the HELOC agreement. A power of attorney. It was a standard, downloadable form, granting Martin Lawrence full and sweeping authority over all real estate and financial matters for the property at 1412 Salish Point Road. My forged signature was at the bottom, just above the notary block. And the notary block was the key. The stamp was real. The commission number was valid. It was from a notary public at the town center supermarket, the one just outside my parents' neighborhood, the one my mother used to get her shipping labels certified. This was the mechanism. This was the weapon. They hadn't just forged my name. They had found a notary, either complicit or catastrophically negligent, to legitimize the forgery, to take a fake document and give it the force of law. This was the linchpin of the entire conspiracy. I had the physical evidence. Now I needed the digital. My mind, trained for this, began to run parallel processes. I opened my phone's web browser. I searched Harborline Build Co. on Instagram. Their profile was public. Of course it was. I scrolled down. 1 post, 2 posts, 3, and there, posted 4 days ago, a selfie. It was Frank, the site supervisor I had just kicked out, grinning broadly. Beside him were 2 younger workers, all giving a thumbs up. They were standing in my bathroom, or what was my bathroom. Behind them, the wall was open to the studs, the floor covered in the debris of my Hinoki tub. The caption read, "Day 1 on this amazing Pink Haven transformation. So excited to get started." My eyes narrowed. I read the tags. Harborline Build Co., Olympic Peninsula, renovation. And the last one, Brielle's new home. I took a screenshot. I saved it. This was the proof of intent. This wasn't a renovation for Camilla. It was, in their own public, documented words. Brielle's new home. It corroborated my father's statement, the statement I had recorded on video. The case was building. The narrative was clear. I went back to the county portal. This time, I logged into my own secure account. As the owner of record, I had access to more than the public. I filed an immediate, formal public records request for the access logs associated with the filing of Permit 5499B. I didn't just want the document. I wanted the digital envelope it came in. I wanted the IP address that uploaded it. I wanted the user agent string of the browser. I wanted the precise millisecond timestamp of the submission. I knew, with the certainty of a career built on finding hidden numbers, what I would find. The IP address would trace back to my parents' house, or Grant's apartment, or a public Wi-Fi network near one of them. They wouldn't have been smart enough to use a VPN. Amateurs always make the same mistakes. I stood up and paced the dusty floor, my mind assembling the final preliminary report. 1. Criminal trespass, facilitated by Diane Lawrence's key. 2. Forgery of my signature on a state building permit application. 3. Identity theft and bank fraud, executed by opening a home equity line of credit in my name. 4. A fraudulent, falsely notarized power of attorney used as the instrument for the fraud. 5. Conspiracy and self-dealing, evidenced by the Pink Haven Interiors kickback scheme. 6. Gross negligence and code violations by the contractor. Harborline Build Co., providing immediate leverage. 7. Publicly documented intent to permanently transfer the use of my property, evidenced by the Brielle's new home tag and my father's recorded statement. This was not a family drama. This was a multi-count felony indictment waiting to be filed. My father, my brother Grant, my sister Brielle, and a local notary had just conspired to commit economic-grade grand larceny. And they had left all the evidence on my kitchen counter. I didn't clean the dust. I didn't touch the drywall debris. I left the scene exactly as I found it, a perfect capsule of the violation. I picked up my phone and made one call. It was just after 5 p.m. on a Friday. Miles Ortega picked up on the second ring. "Camilla," he said. His voice is always flat, devoid of surprise. "Miles, activate the file. Hostile takeover of the Olympic property." "Go on." I didn't use emotional language. I didn't say my father, my mother, or my sister. I gave him the data points, forensic style. Entry via spare key, provided to Diane Lawrence. Unauthorized demolition and construction of the master suite. Contractor is Harborline Build Co. Permit filed under a fraudulent entity. Lawrence Family Renewal LLC. Citing a forged power of attorney and a fraudulent HELOC. I have the permit, the POA, and the HELOC account number. There was a pause on the line, not of shock, but of rapid, cold calculation. "Good," he said. "Don't touch anything. Don't speak to any of them. I'm sending you a secure link. Upload every photograph, the video of Martin's statement, and high-resolution scans of every document you just mentioned. I'll handle the immediate stop work." I already stopped the work, Miles. I confronted the site supervisor and ordered them off the property an hour ago. "Good," he said again, and I detected a rare, thin note of approval. "But a verbal stop work from you isn't the same as a legal one from the county. It needs to be official. I'll have an emergency order filed with the building department and posted by a process server before 9 a.m. tomorrow. They won't be able to hammer a single nail." He was better than his word. At 8:15 the next morning, a Saturday, a county-marked vehicle rolled up the gravel drive, followed by a sheriff's cruiser. I watched from the living room window, my coffee cup in hand. A grim-faced man in a county windbreaker, flanked by the deputy, walked to my front door. He didn't knock. He affixed a massive, fluorescent red sticker directly over the wood. "Stop work order," it screamed in thick black letters. "Violation of county code. All work prohibited by law. Further activity will result in fines and penalties." It was the first layer of the new wall. The legal boundary was now visible to the entire world. While the red tag was being posted, Miles's office was already executing the next phase. "We're sending spoliation letters," he'd explained over the phone. Polite threats with very large teeth. These were formal demands for the preservation of evidence. One went via bonded courier and certified mail to the owner of Harborline Build Company. It informed him, in no uncertain terms, that his company was a party to a significant civil and potentially criminal fraud. It demanded that he preserve, and not delete, alter, or destroy, every piece of data related to this project. Miles had listed them specifically. All emails, text messages, chat logs, and voicemails exchanged with Martin Lawrence, Brielle Lawrence, or Grant Lawrence, all contracts, change orders, cost estimates, and invoices, all digital photographs or videos taken by your crew, including, but not limited to, those posted on social media, all payroll records and time cards for the crew on site, and most critically, all banking records showing receipt of payment from the fraudulent entity, Lawrence Family Renewal LLC. A second similar letter went to Pink Haven Interiors LLC. This one was sharper. It explicitly cited the invoice for a 20% consulting fee as potential evidence of conspiracy to commit wire fraud. It demanded the preservation of their communications with Brielle, and all bank statements showing the disbursement and flow of those funds. Miles was locking the exits. If they deleted a single email after receiving that letter, it wouldn't be an accident. It would be a new, separate crime: obstruction of justice. While Miles handled the contractors, I handled the bank. This was my turf. I called the fraud department of the national bank that had issued the HELOC. I didn't bother with the customer service line. I used my professional credentials to get escalated immediately to a senior fraud investigator. "My name is Camilla Lawrence. I am a forensic accountant and the chief operating officer of Northbridge Analytics. I am calling to report a case of advanced identity theft and bank fraud perpetrated against me, resulting in the fraudulent opening of a home equity line of credit, account number ending in 9021. The investigator, a woman named Sharon, whose entire demeanor changed the moment I said forensic accountant, turned very professional, very quickly. I laid out the facts. I had never applied for this loan. The property was solely in my name, free and clear. The debt was entirely unauthorized. The perpetrators were members of my family. "We will need you to come into a branch and sign an affidavit," she said, her voice crisp. "I'll do better," I replied, my tone matching hers. "My attorney is drafting a formal affidavit of non-authorization as we speak. It will be notarized by a reputable notary from a national firm and will be on your desk by Monday morning. It will state for the record that I did not sign the power of attorney. I did not sign the loan application, and I repudiate all signatures and associated debts. I expect this account to be frozen, effective immediately. I am placing an administrative freeze on the account right now," she confirmed. "No further disbursements will be authorized. Can you confirm the amount drawn?" The contractor's folder shows an initial draw of $50,000, paid out earlier this week. "I can confirm that. The funds were disbursed 3 days ago." "Then you need to open an internal investigation into the notary who validated the fraudulent power of attorney," I said, my voice cold. "I have the commission number, 78439. The stamp belongs to a public notary operating out of the town center supermarket in Bellevue." Sharon was silent for a beat. "Thank you, Ms. Lawrence. That is exceptionally helpful. We will action this immediately." The financial pipeline was now severed. They couldn't draw another dime, and the bank, realizing it had been defrauded and was on the hook for $50,000, was now my unwilling and very powerful ally. The property was legally secured, but not physically. My mother still had a key. My family still believed they had rights. First, I documented the damage. I couldn't rely on the county inspector, who would only care about code. I needed to quantify the cost of the violation. I hired my own. I called a structural engineer from a top firm in Seattle, paying the emergency weekend rate. I didn't want a simple home inspector. I wanted an expert witness. He arrived Sunday morning, his face growing grimmer as he walked through the mess. He spent 3 hours documenting everything. He confirmed my suspicion about the electrical panel. "This is a fire trap, ma'am. That 60-amp breaker on that gauge of wire? It's not just a code violation. It's criminally negligent. It would have melted the sheathing and ignited the studs inside that wall within a week." He found more. "They tore out a load-bearing header between the bathroom and bedroom to widen the doorway," he said, pointing his laser at the ceiling. "They didn't re-brace it. They've compromised the structural integrity of this entire wing." He found plumbing violations. "The drain for the new tub isn't vented properly. You'd have sewer gas backing up into the house within days." He found waterproofing failures. "This glossy white tile? It's cheap, porous ceramic, not marble, and they didn't install a waterproof membrane behind it. This entire bathroom would have been saturated with black mold in 6 months." He provided a full 20-page written report, complete with cost-to-cure estimates that ran well into the 6 figures. This wasn't a renovation. It was a targeted demolition. After the engineer left, I secured the perimeter. I drove to an electronics store and bought 4 motion-activated, cloud-connected security cameras. I was careful. I placed them only in the common areas, which was perfectly legal in my own home. One in the living room, facing the red-tagged front door, one in the kitchen, aimed at the island and the paperwork I had carefully moved, one on the exterior, monitoring the driveway. I wanted a high-definition record of the next time one of them used that key. The final step of the lockdown was the most personal. Miles drafted the letters. They were not angry. They were cold, procedural, and terrifying. They were sent via process server to Martin Lawrence, Diane Lawrence, Brielle Lawrence, and Grant Lawrence. The letters formally revoked all access, implied or explicit, to the property at 1412 Salish Point Road. They stated that their presence, or the presence of any agent acting on their behalf, would be considered criminal trespass and would be reported to the sheriff. The letter to my mother explicitly revoked the emergency access granted by the spare key, noting that its use constituted a profound breach of trust that facilitated a multi-layered fraud. It demanded the key's immediate return via certified mail. Each letter ended with the same chilling paragraph, drafted by Miles. "Be advised that you may be held jointly and severally liable for all costs associated with the remediation of the unauthorized construction, structural damage, code violations, and associated legal fees. We strongly advise you to secure your own legal counsel." The war was no longer quiet. The first shots were fired. I spent Sunday evening in the dusty, silent cabin. I sat at the kitchen counter, the scene of the crime, and I built my case file. I opened a new spreadsheet. This was my work. This was my comfort. Column A, date time. Column B, event. Column C, evidence. Column D, parties involved. Row 1. Diane Lawrence requests and receives spare key. Row 2. Forged power of attorney, notarized at Town Center Supermarket. Row 3. Fraudulent HELOC application submitted to bank. Row 4. Permit 5499B filed with county, citing Camila L., awaiting IP log from public records request. Row 5. Harborline contracted by Lawrence Family Renewal, LLC. Row 6. $50,000 draw from HELOC. Row 7. Kickback paid to Pink Haven, LLC. Row 8. Demolition begins. Evidence. Contractor's Instagram post. Brielle's new home. Row 9. Martin Lawrence states intent. Evidence. My video recording. A gift. Her new home. Row 10. Code violations and structural damage. Evidence. Independent engineer's report. It was a perfect, linear, undeniable chain of evidence, from the key to the POA to the permit to the money to the construction. Miles and I had spoken about the inevitable public phase. Brielle would run to social media. Martin would play the victim to the family. "We stay silent," Miles ordered. "We do not engage in the emotional theater. We do not respond on Facebook. We do not correct their lies. We let them build their own gallows. If a reporter calls, you have one, and only one." Statement. There is a legal matter regarding unauthorized construction and fraud on my property. I am cooperating with the authorities and cannot comment further. Facts, not feelings. Let them drown in their own drama. The strategy was set. The locks were in place. Now, I needed to gather all the conspirators. I couldn't just serve them with a lawsuit. That would give them time to align their stories, to build their defenses, to delete the evidence Miles hadn't yet secured. I needed a lure, something that played to their arrogance, their belief that I was still the callous but ultimately pliable daughter who would eventually cave. I opened a new email. I addressed it to Martin, Brielle, and Grant. The subject line, Urgent, Cabin Interior Selections. The message, since the work has already been started and the stop work order is temporary, we need to finalize the interior selections to avoid further delays. I am scheduling a mandatory meeting at the cabin this coming Saturday at 2 p.m. We need to finalize the paint, tile, and fixtures. If you do not attend, I will be forced to make all decisions myself and revert the design to the original. It was the perfect bait. It offered them the one thing they craved: control. It framed the conflict as a simple disagreement over taste. Pink Haven versus my design. Not a felony. It made me sound like I was already conceding, already willing to negotiate the terms of my own surrender. I hit send. Now, all I had to do was wait for the rats to walk into the trap. It took less than 12 hours for the first wave to hit. My lure. The email about interior selections had been the strategic equivalent of poking a hornet's nest with a steel rod. They didn't just get angry, they went public. The notification came on Monday morning. A text from a cousin I hadn't spoken to in 3 years. Camilla, what on earth did you do to your mother? I opened Facebook, and there it was. Brielle had unleashed her masterpiece of emotional theater. It was a long, rambling, breathless post. Crafted for maximum sympathy, it began, I am shattered to my core. She wrote about her family's dream of a fresh start, a safe haven in the woods, a place where her children could finally breathe. She painted a picture of a loving family coming together to renew a neglected property, turning it into a home. Then came the turn, my name, the cold sister, the heartless executive. We poured our hearts and our last pennies into making this dream a reality, only to have my sister, Camila, show up unexpectedly. She wrote, she didn't ask questions. She didn't talk to us. She called the authorities and threw her own family out onto the street, all because she couldn't stand to see us happy. She would rather let that beautiful house rot than share it. It was a masterwork of lies. She'd conflated my calling the contractor with calling the authorities. She'd framed my arrival at my own home as showing up unexpectedly. But the real weapon was the photograph attached to the post. It was my mother, Diane. She was sitting at her kitchen table, her face puffy, her eyes red and swollen. A crumpled tissue was clutched in her hand. She looked utterly devastated, the perfect portrait of a victimized matriarch. It was a photo designed to inflict maximum guilt, a nuclear-grade emotional bomb. The comments section exploded. It was a digital feeding frenzy, a chorus of my extended family's long-simmering resentments. My Aunt Carol. I am speechless. Camila, money has truly poisoned you. Your mother is a saint, and you've broken her heart. An uncle from Florida. Your father worked his fingers to the bone for your education, and this is how you repay him? By humiliating him and your sister? Shameful. Cousins, distant relatives, my mother's friends, all chimed in. Family is everything. You can't take the money with you. Some people are so selfish. They'd rather hoard their wealth than help their own blood. I read every single comment. I felt nothing. The emotional part of my brain, the one that might have been wounded by this tidal wave of manufactured outrage, had simply shut down. The forensic accountant, however, was wide awake and taking notes. I didn't reply. I didn't defend myself. I followed Miles's order. Do not engage. Instead, I began my own documentation. I took high-resolution, full-page screenshots of the entire post and all 147 comments. I meticulously archived every single one, because buried in their emotional attacks was the hard evidence I needed. Brielle's post. Making this dream a reality. Aunt Carol. Humiliating him and your sister, a cousin. So cruel to take away their new home. They were all, publicly, on the record, confirming my central thesis, intent. This was never a renovation for me. It was a planned, hostile appropriation. They were all admitting it. Then came the direct assaults. Grant didn't bother with the public theater of Facebook. He sent an email. Subject line, legal action. It was a long, incoherent, self-righteous tirade. It was filled with typos and grandiose claims. He accused me of slander against the family name. He claimed the cabin was ancestral property and part of the Lawrence family legacy. This was a spectacular lie. I had bought the property, free and clear, from a retired couple from Seattle. The Lawrences had never had any legacy in the Olympics. Then he invented a new, fascinating legal theory. He claimed he had a stake in all my assets, including the cabin, based on his emotional and intellectual contribution to my success. Who do you think inspired you with all those big ideas? He wrote. Who provided the moral support? That's a contribution. Camila, I have an emotional stake. You can't just lock me out of my own family's property. Our lawyer will be in touch. I saved the email as Exhibit B. It was a perfect, unfiltered confession of his delusional entitlement. My father's attack was, as always, the most personal. He called. I looked at the screen, saw his name, and set the phone face down on the counter. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. A minute later, the notification pinged. I played the message on speakerphone. His voice wasn't the apoplectic rage from the cabin. This was his wounded patriarch voice, the one laced with disappointment and leveraged guilt. Camila, it's your father. I cannot believe what you've done. I paid for your education. I sent you to Wharton. That was my investment, my sacrifice, so that you could have a better life. And this is what I get in return? You betray your own blood? You put a red tag, on your sister's home? You've embarrassed me. You've embarrassed this entire family. I don't even know who you are anymore. Click. I saved the audio file. Exhibit C, your sister's home. Thank you, Dad. I bundled all of it, the Facebook screenshots, Grant's email, Martin's audio file, into a new, password-protected folder and uploaded it to Miles's secure server. The public noise had real-world consequences. The Olympic Peninsula is a small, interconnected community, a high-end cabin, red-tagged by the county and abandoned by its crew, is gossip. A local community news blogger, the kind who reports on everything from lost dogs to zoning disputes, got wind of the story. He found one of the Harborline crew members, probably Frank, nursing a beer and a grievance at a local bar. The blog post went up on Wednesday. Dispute halts luxury renovation. The crew member, quoted anonymously, had been wonderfully candid. It's a total mess, he'd said. We were hired by the family to do a full gut on the master suite. The owner, this young woman named Brielle, was there for the walkthrough. Picked out all the pink tile and gold fixtures herself. Then her sister, some big shot from Seattle, shows up and has a meltdown. Threw us all out. Now the county's involved. We're just trying to get paid. I screenshotted the article. Exhibit D, a third-party, disinterested witness, publicly identifying Brielle as the owner. This was pure gold. The ripples were hitting my professional world as well. On Thursday, a registered letter arrived at my penthouse from the bank's corporate headquarters. It was not a friendly follow-up from Sharon, the fraud investigator. It was a cold, formal notification of potential signature irregularity and high-risk activity. They were officially notifying me that the HELOC was frozen, which I already knew, but they were also formally requesting that I verify my signature, in person, at a branch, with a valid government ID. The bank, now realizing it was on the hook for a $50,000 fraudulent disbursement, was covering its legal bases. They were beginning the process of proving they were the victims of a sophisticated fraud, not a negligent lender. This was exactly what I wanted. I didn't just go to the branch. I replied to the letter. Sharon and the bank's chief legal counsel. In response to your request, I wrote, I am attaching a full data package for your fraud investigation unit. You will find 1. My fully executed and notarized affidavit of non-authorization, repudiating the debt. 2. The public records response from the county assessor, showing the fraudulent permit was digitally filed from IP address 73.15201.98. This IP address is registered to Martin Lawrence at his home address in Bellevue. 3. Geolocation data from my mobile carrier, confirming my device was located at my office in Seattle at the precise time of the alleged notarization in Bellevue. 4. The invoice from Pink Haven Interiors, LLC, demonstrating a clear kickback scheme. 5. All public social media posts and news articles, where the perpetrators openly state their intent to possess the property. I was no longer just a victim reporting a crime. I was a forensic accountant, handing them their entire case on a silver platter. I was making it legally, financially, and logistically impossible for them to dismiss this as a messy family dispute. I was aligning their $50,000 problem with my solution. Miles called me after I forwarded him the bank package. They're all doing our work for us, he said. The satisfaction in his voice was palpable. They're arrogant, they're emotional, and they're stupid. They're creating a public record of their own conspiracy. Now, brace yourself. Grant's threat of a lawsuit is nonsense, but it's the kind of nonsense that might get a hungry lawyer to file a lis pendens just to cloud your title. They are escalating. What's our move? I asked. We hold, he said. We let them make the next, final mistake, but if they file anything, a lawsuit, a restraining order, anything, we are not just defending, we are filing an immediate, multi-count countersuit. We will name Martin, Grant, Brielle, and the notary public as co-conspirators. The suit will allege forgery, bank fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy, and civil trespass. We will seek full remediation costs, all legal fees, and the maximum punitive damages allowed by the state of Washington. They push, Camila, and we end them. I was waiting for that final mistake. I didn't have to wait long. Brielle, buoyed by the echo chamber of sympathy on her Facebook page, felt invincible. She believed she had won the narrative war. She thought I was the one who was cornered. So she doubled down. On Friday morning, she made a new post. It was an entire photo album, titled, My Dream Home Vision Board, What My Sister is Trying to Destroy. It was a dozen high-resolution, professional-grade digital renderings. There it was. The pink and gold bathroom, the Hollywood vanity, the new bedroom layout, complete with a nursery where my meditation corner used to be. It was the full Pink Haven style manifest. I looked at the images. My professional curiosity was piqued. They were too good. The lighting, the ray tracing, the textures. This wasn't something Brielle's friend had mocked up on a cheap design app. This was the work of a high-end firm. I downloaded one of the images, the master bathroom rendering. I opened a reverse image search. It took less than half a second. The image was a direct, pixel-for-pixel match. It was not Pink Haven style. It belonged to a prestigious, award-winning interior design firm based in Copenhagen, Denmark. It was a flagship image from their modern Roskilde portfolio. Brielle and her designer friend hadn't just been inspired by it. They had stolen it. They had ripped the copyrighted images from the firm's website, passed them off as their own original work, and had the audacity to invoice my fraudulent HELOC for it. I smiled, a real, cold, genuine smile. This was no longer just a family fraud. This was no longer just a local bank fraud. This was now international copyright infringement and design piracy. Brielle, in her infinite arrogance, had just handed me a new, very powerful, and very well-funded potential ally. I sent the link to the Danish firm's portfolio to Miles. His reply, 5 minutes later, was a single word. Checkmate. My email was the lure, sent on Monday. The text was simple. designed to prey on their arrogance and their assumption of my eventual, resentful compliance. Subject: urgent. Cabin interior selections. Martin, Brielle, Grant. The county has issued a temporary stop work order due to the permit discrepancies. This is a procedural delay, to avoid further costs. We need to finalize the interior selections for the contractor. I am scheduling a mandatory meeting at the cabin this Saturday at 2 p.m. We will finalize all paint, tile, and fixtures. If you do not attend, I will be forced to assume you have abandoned the project, and I will instruct my own team to revert everything to the original design at your expense. It was a masterpiece of bait. It simultaneously acknowledged their project, validated their control over selections, and presented me as the one concerned with costs. It was an invitation to their own execution, and they RSVP'd yes within an hour. Brielle, brimming with confidence from her social media victory, replied first, "We'll be there. See my vision board. We are not reverting anything." With the bait taken, I spent the next 4 days constructing the trap. This was no longer a home. It was a deposition room. My week was a blur of parallel tracks, a logistical ballet of legal maneuvers. First, I called the county building department. I spoke to the chief inspector, a man named Henderson. I didn't position it as a family spat. I presented myself as a property owner victimized by a contractor. "Mr. Delaney," I said. "My attorney, Miles Ortega, filed the emergency stop work order last week regarding the fraudulent permit at 1412 Salish Point. The structural engineer I hired has since identified multiple severe code violations, including a compromised load-bearing wall and dangerous NEC violations in the electrical panel." His tone changed instantly. This was no longer a paperwork dispute. This was a liability issue. "I have the engineer's report ready for your review," I continued. "I have also compelled the contractor, Harborline Build Co., to meet me on site. I am formally requesting your presence for a site inspection to review these violations." We scheduled it. Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Second, I called Sharon at the bank. "Sharon, the individuals who perpetrated the fraud are meeting me at the property on Saturday at 2:30 p.m. They are under the impression they are there to discuss interior design." "Ms. Lawrence, we cannot—" "I don't need you to confront them," I said, cutting her off. "I need your fraud department's representative to be present. I need them to see the perpetrators and the property they used as collateral. I need your rep to ask one question. Who authorized this HELOC? This is your best chance to identify the individuals who defrauded your bank of $50,000, or we can let it play out in discovery, which will take 2 years. A brief hold. A new voice came on the line. "Mr. Cole, I'm the lead investigator. What time did you say?" We were confirmed. Saturday, 2:30 p.m. Third, Miles sent a final, formal letter to Dave, the owner of Harborline Build Co. It was not a request. It was a demand. "You are hereby ordered to appear at the property to receive the official engineer's report detailing gross negligence, structural compromise, and multiple code violations. Failure to appear will be entered into the record as an admission of fault and willful abandonment of a hazardous site, and we will proceed with immediate license revocation proceedings with the state." They were trapped. If they didn't come, they admitted guilt. If they came, they walked into my ambush. They confirmed they would be there at 2:30. The stage was set. Now, for the technical setup. On Saturday morning, I arrived at the cabin at 8 a.m. The red stop work tag on the door was a beautiful, stark reminder of the new boundary. I let myself in. The drywall dust still hung in the air. A cold, gritty perfume. I went to the utility closet and opened the breaker panel. I looked at the sloppy, dangerous 60-amp breaker my father's crew had installed. I flipped it off. I flipped off the breakers for the guest wing, the outdoor lighting, and the hot water heater. I left only the kitchen and living room circuits active. Then I went to the crawl space and found the main water shut off. I turned the valve until the pipes were dry. I went back inside and opened the kitchen faucet. A trickle, then air. I left it open. a subtle sign of a problem with the well. This was strategic. One functioning room, one source of light, one sink. It would funnel everyone into the kitchen, the one area where my surveillance was concentrated. The interior cameras I had installed last week were already active, recording to the cloud, but I needed audio. I placed a small, high-gain directional microphone under the lip of the kitchen island, aimed at the open floor. I placed a second one inside a decorative vase on the counter. Finally, I prepped myself. I wore a simple black blouse. Pinned to the placket, almost invisible, was a button camera. It fed to a recorder in my pocket. I was now a walking recording, admissible evidence-gathering unit. My last hour was spent in my war room. I had turned the dining table into a presentation area. I unrolled the centerpiece, a massive 3-foot by 4-foot architectural plot print. It was not a blueprint, it was a flowchart, my own forensic map of their crime. It had 3 primary branches at the top, in bold red letters. Who signed? Who withdrew? Who entered? The Who Signed branch led to a high-resolution scan of the fraudulent Camila L. on the permit, and a scan of the forged POA. An arrow pointed to the notary's stamp and commission number. The Who Withdrew branch showed the HELOC account number, the $50,000 draw, and 2 diverging arrows. One arrow, labeled Harborline Build Co., showed their invoice. The second arrow, labeled Pink Haven Interiors LLC, showed Brielle's friend's invoice, with the 20% consulting fee highlighted in yellow. It was a diagram of the kickback. The Who Entered branch showed a photo of the intact lock, a copy of my mother's written request for the key, and a timeline of the contractor's access, complete with the Brielle's new home Instagram post. This chart was not for them. It was for the inspector and the banker. It was a visual summary of the indictment. Beside this chart, I placed the binder. It was a 4-inch D-ring binder, heavy as a brick. It was the full, unassailable narrative. Tab 1. Property title. My name. Sole ownership. Tab 2. The fraudulent instruments. The POA. The HELOC agreement. The permit. Tab 3. Digital evidence. The county IP log. Tracing the permit filing directly to Martin Lawrence's home IP address. The social media screenshots. Brielle's dream home posts. The stolen Danish design images. Tab 4. Financials. The bank statements. The drawdown. The invoices from Harborline and Pink Haven. Tab 5. The damage. The 20-page structural engineer's report, filled with high-resolution photos of the cut wiring, the missing header, and the leaking plumbing. Tab 6. Witness testimony. This I had acquired yesterday. I had visited my neighbor, Mr. Delaney, an elderly, retired fisherman who missed nothing. He had been suspicious from day one. He had kept a log. He was more meticulous than I was. His signed, notarized affidavit was sitting as Exhibit 6A. It detailed every truck that had arrived, the license plates, and the fact that Brielle's car had been on site directing the workers 3 separate times. The trap was set. The evidence was staged. I stood by the window, looking out at the gravel drive. I was not nervous. I was not angry. I was a surgeon about to make the first, precise incision. My internal monologue was a simple script. Do not argue. Do not accuse. Do not engage with the emotion. Ask questions. Demand confirmation. Let them impale themselves on the facts. At 1:55 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. This is Miles. I am on the access road. 1 minute out. I will be parked and waiting. You signal. I'm at the door in 30 seconds. At 1:59 p.m., I heard the crunch of tires. Not one car, but 2. My father's oversized black SUV, followed by Grant's leased sedan. They were early, arrogant, ready to divide the spoils. I heard car doors slam. I heard Brielle's laugh, high and triumphant. I took a slow, steadying breath. I touched the button on my chest. The recorder in my pocket gave a single, silent vibration. I was rolling. I walked to the front door and unlocked it, just as Martin's hand, holding my mother's key, was about to insert it into the lock. I unlocked the door, but I didn't step back. I held the heavy oak, creating a choke point. My father, Martin, pushed past me first, his face a mask of magnanimous, forced patience. "Camilla, this is childish. Let's get this over with." Brielle followed, bouncing on her heels, her phone already in her hand as if documenting her triumphant return. "Oh, it's just as I remembered," she trilled, gliding into the kitchen and completely ignoring the red tag on the door. "This dust is tragic, but wait until you see the new swatches. I'm thinking a much warmer pink-gold tone for the nursery. The light in here is perfect for it. The kids are just going to—" Quiet. My voice cut through her monologue, sharp and cold. She froze. Grant was the last one in, looking shifty, his eyes darting to the floor, the ceiling, anywhere but at me. "In the kitchen," I said. It was not a request. I shut the door. The sound of the deadbolt locking behind them was loud and final in the small space. My father immediately tried to take control. He leaned against my counter, just as he had a week ago, adopting the posture of the man of the house. "Now, Camilla, I'm glad you've seen reason. We are a family, and as a family, we can find a compromise. Your sister's vision is irrelevant," I said. I was standing at the head of the dining table, the binder and the large flowchart the only things on its surface. "We are not here to discuss selections. We are here to establish a timeline of facts." I pointed to the top of the flowchart and the copy of the county permit taped to it. "This is the permit. It was filed digitally. Who filed it?" A heavy silence fell. My father's smile tightened. Grant suddenly became fascinated by a speck of dust on his shoe. Brielle looked to her father, her confidence wavering. "Grant," my father said, his voice clipped. You handled the paperwork side, didn't you?" Brielle, relieved to have the spotlight off her, chimed in. "Right. Grant did all that computer stuff. He's the tech guy." "Thank you. Brielle, you've confirmed my first data point." I picked up a remote and turned on the large 32-inch monitor I had placed on the counter. The screen flickered to life, showing a spreadsheet. "Grant, you confirmed you handled the paperwork," I said, my voice flat. "This is the public records log I received from the county's IT department. It shows that permit number 5499B was filed from IP address 73.15.201.98. That IP address is registered to you, Grant, at your apartment in Bellevue." Grant's head snapped up. His face was pale. "Furthermore," I continued, "the submission timestamp is 8:14 p.m., 2 weeks ago, according to your own Instagram story, posted at 8:30 that same night. You were at the home office, hustling, with your laptop visible in the background. Congratulations. You've just been placed at the scene of the crime." "Now, wait a minute," Grant sputtered. "I was just helping Dad. It's not a crime to file a paper." "It is," I interrupted. "When you can't file the permit without this." I slid the next document across the table. The power of attorney. The one with my forged signature. "You needed this to get the permit. You needed this to get the loan. Who signed it?" My father stepped forward, his face flushing with indignation. He was moving into his wounded patriarch script. "This is an interrogation. We are your family. You signed that. Camilla, we discussed it over dinner one night. You were busy with work. You told us to just handle the details. You've clearly forgotten." "I have not forgotten," I said. I reached into the binder and pulled out a new document, placing it next to the POA. "I retained a forensic handwriting expert, a man who testifies in federal court. This is his 12-page report. It concludes, and I quote, 'With 100% certainty that the signature of Camilla Ann Lawrence is a non-genuine, traced simulation, executed with a slow, drawing-like motion inconsistent with natural handwriting.'" I looked directly at my father. "He is prepared to testify to that in court. Do you want to continue with the I forgot narrative, or shall we move on to the money?" Before he could answer, Brielle rushed in to defend the territory she cared about. "Money? You're complaining about money? My friend gave us a huge family discount on the design. She barely charged us anything. You're so ungrateful." "The discount," I repeated, my voice devoid of emotion. I turned to the next page on my flowchart, the one showing the Pink Haven LLC invoice. "Your friend's consulting fee was 20% of the entire $50,000 loan. An absurd amount. I was curious about that. So I subpoenaed the bank records for Pink Haven Interiors LLC. Brielle's manufactured outrage evaporated, replaced by a cold, visible dread. "It's fascinating," I said, almost to myself. The $50,000 draw cleared on a Tuesday. On Wednesday, a wire transfer for $9,500 was made from Pink Haven Interiors, directly into your personal checking account. Brielle." Her face went ashen. She actually stumbled back a step, grabbing the counter. That was a finder's fee. It's legal. She was paying me back for a vacation." "It's called a kickback," I stated, "and combined with the fraudulent loan, it's wire fraud. You just admitted to it. My body camera and the microphones in this room have it all recorded." Grant looked like he was going to be physically ill. My father was vibrating, his face a mottled purple, words failing him for the first time in his life. The silence was absolute. The only sound was the wind in the pines outside. And then, exactly at 2:30 p.m., a sharp, authoritative knock echoed through the cabin. I walked to the door and opened it. Standing on my porch were 3 men. Mr. Delaney, the county inspector, in his official windbreaker, a man in a sharp suit, Mr. Cole, from the bank, and Dave Miller, the owner of Harborline Build Co., his face a map of confusion and anger. "Gentlemen, thank you for coming," I said. "Please, come in. The parties you need to speak with are all present." I led them into the kitchen. The trap was now full. Dave Miller saw Martin first. "Mr. Lawrence, what the hell is this? I've got a stop work order on my truck. I've got a letter from some lawyer threatening to end my company. You told me this was your property. You told me you had the authorization." Mr. Cole, the banker, ignored the contractor. His eyes were cold, scanning the faces of my family. "My name is Mr. Cole, from the bank's fraud investigations unit. I am here regarding a home equity line of credit, account ending in 9021, opened against this property. $50,000 has been disbursed. I need to know, right now, who in this room applied for that loan." No one spoke. The air was so thick it was hard to breathe. Grant was staring at the floor. Brielle was frozen. Martin was speechless. "I will answer that," I said. I slid the binder across the counter to Mr. Cole. "Mr. Cole, here is my formal notarized affidavit of non-authorization. I am the sole owner of this property. I did not apply for that loan. I did not authorize that loan. I did not sign that loan, and I repudiate the debt in its entirety. The individuals who did apply for it are standing right in front of you." Mr. Cole opened the binder and his eyes immediately went to the IP logs. His expression hardened. "This is outrageous," Martin finally roared. Finding his voice, he was falling back on his only defense, volume and indignation. "This is a private family matter. You don't air our dirty laundry in front of strangers. I did this for the family. We needed this. Brielle needed this." "For the family," I repeated. "Or a housewarming gift?" I turned to the monitor, which was still displaying the spreadsheets. I hit a different key. The video I had recorded a week ago, the video of my father standing in this very kitchen, filled the screen. His own voice, smug, triumphant, and clear, echoed in the dead silent room. "Just in time, I'm turning this into Brielle's new home, a little housewarming gift." Mr. Cole looked from the video to my father. Dave Miller, the contractor, just shook his head, his face pale. He said it was for his daughter. My God, I'm ruined." Mr. Delaney, the county inspector, who had been silently reviewing my structural engineer's report and the flowchart, finally spoke. "Mr. Lawrence, he said, his voice heavy with authority. "This report shows gross negligence. You're lucky you didn't burn the place down or have the roof collapse. This whole thing is a criminal investigation as far as I'm concerned." The room was a pressurized capsule of guilt, the lies stripped bare, replaced by the hard, cold language of fraud, liability, and crime. And at that precise, perfect moment of maximum pressure, there was one final knock on the door. It was different, sharp, confident, decisive. I opened it. Miles Ortega. He was in a perfectly tailored dark gray suit, holding 3 thick, cream-colored vellum envelopes. He stepped inside, his presence immediately sucking any remaining oxygen from the room. His cold eyes scanned each person, the banker, the inspector, the contractor, and then, one by one, my family. "Mr. Martin Lawrence," he said, his voice like polished stone. He stepped forward and handed him the first envelope. "Ms. Brielle Lawrence." He handed her the second. She took it with a trembling hand. "Mr. Grant Lawrence." He handed him the third. "My name is Miles Ortega," he said, standing in the center of the room. "I represent Ms. Camila Lawrence, the sole owner of this property. What you are holding is a formal demand for the preservation of all evidence, including all digital communications and financial records, pending imminent civil and criminal litigation. It outlines the preliminary charges being explored, including forgery, conspiracy to commit bank fraud, wire fraud, and aggravated trespass. I would strongly suggest you do not speak another word, and you hand those letters to your attorneys. If you do not have legal counsel, I suggest you retain it, immediately." The explosion had passed. What remained was the procedural fallout, the cold, gray machinery of the law beginning to grind. The air in the room was unbreathable, thick with my family's panic and the sterile, professional focus of the men I had summoned. Inspector Henderson, holding my engineer's 20-page report, was the first to move. He was no longer a guest. He was a state official conducting an enforcement action. He pulled a carbon copy citation book from his satchel and began writing, his pen pressing hard. "Mr. Lawrence," he said, not looking at my father, but at the paperwork, "I'm citing this property for 5 distinct and severe code violations, based on my personal inspection and the findings of the independent engineer." He was addressing Martin, the name on the fraudulent permit. He tore off the first sheet and slapped it onto the kitchen counter. "Next to my flowchart. Nay, violation of National Electrical Code, Section 334.30, the 60-amp breaker on wiring not rated for the load, combined with the unclamped sheathing at the panel box, constitutes an immediate fire hazard." My father stared at the paper, his face still purple, his mouth opening and closing uselessly. 2. Violation of International Building Code, Section 2308.5. You have an unpermitted, unsupported removal of a load-bearing header between the bedroom and bathroom. That's a structural failure in progress. The roof load is compromised. He tore off another sheet. 3. Violation of Uniform Plumbing Code, Section 701.2. Improper venting of the new drain line. You were days away from filling this cabin with sewer gas. 4. Violation of Building Code, Section 1403.2. Failure to install a code-compliant, weather-resistant barrier. The moisture penetration behind that cheap tile. He jabbed a thumb toward my ruined bathroom. Would have created a systemic black mold situation within a single season. And 5. Drainage. The grate is wrong. The trap is non-compliant. This entire installation, he gestured to the whole mess, is a complete gut job. It's not a renovation, it's a hazard. He wrote a final, sweeping note on the last page and tore it off. "This is the official order from the county. You, the filer of the permit, Lawrence Family Renewal LLC, have exactly 14 days from today to remediate. That means demolish and remove all non-compliant work and restore the property to its original, safe condition. If that deadline is not met, you will be fined $1,000 per day, every day, until it is. That fine attaches to the permit. And as the filer, that fine attaches to you." He looked, for the first time, at me. Ms. Lawrence, the stop work order is absolute. Nothing moves on this property until a new, valid permit is filed by a licensed contractor and a full structural inspection is passed. Do you understand? I understand completely. Mr. Delaney, thank you. He nodded, packed his bag, and left. He was followed by Mr. Cole, the banker, who gave a single, cold nod to Miles before walking out. The silence they left behind was filled only by the sound of Brielle's ragged, panicked breathing. Miles now turned his attention to Dave Miller, the contractor from Harborline, who looked like a man watching his entire career evaporate. Mr. Miller, Miles said, his voice quiet, almost kind. You are in a very bad position. You were negligent. You failed to perform the most basic due diligence, a simple $50 title search to verify the owner of the property you were demolishing. You took the word of a man who was not your client. He told me. He said he was the owner, Dave whispered, gesturing helplessly at Martin. And now you are liable. You are liable for the cost of the fraudulent $50,000 draw. You are liable for the remediation of the hazardous work your crew performed. You are liable for the structural damage they caused. You are liable for the fines. And you are liable for the design piracy your subcontractor, Pink Haven, engaged in. I can't. That's hundreds of thousands. Or, Miles continued smoothly, you can provide us with a full, sworn affidavit. You can provide us with every email, every text message, and every voicemail you exchanged with Martin, Grant, and Brielle Lawrence. You can become our primary witness against them. In exchange, Ms. Lawrence will pursue their assets to cover the cost of remediation, not yours. Your liability will be limited to your insurance deductible. You have 24 hours to decide. Dave Miller looked at my father, who wouldn't meet his gaze. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a new, burning hatred for them. You'll have it in 1 hour, he said. He turned and fled. Miles was now the only visitor left. He looked at my family, who were frozen, trapped between the dining table and the counter. Those letters, he said, pointing to the vellum envelopes they were clutching, are not requests. They are legal demands. Your electronic lives are now evidence. If you delete a single text message, you will be adding obstruction of justice to your list of problems. I suggest you go home. You need to hire lawyers, not one lawyer, 3 separate lawyers. He walked to the door and opened it. Get out. They scrambled. Grant practically ran, tripping on the threshold. Brielle was sobbing, a hysterical, gulping sound. My father was silent. He walked stiff-legged, his shoulders hunched. He looked like an old man. He didn't look at me. I locked the door behind them. The silence was, for the first time in a week, real. Well done, Miles said, straightening his tie. It's not done, I replied. Now the next phase begins. The legal escalation was immediate and multifaceted. On Monday morning, Miles filed formal demand notices against Harborline and Pink Haven Interiors, putting their insurance carriers on notice for the full, catastrophic amount of the damage. The bank, as promised, acted with the swift, impersonal viciousness of a corporation protecting its bottom line. Sharon, the investigator, called me personally. Ms. Lawrence, our internal investigation is complete. We have formally closed the fraudulent HELOC. The $50,000 debt has been removed from your name. We have filed a suspicious activity report with the federal government. Furthermore, our identity fraud division has opened a formal criminal case file against the individuals who filed the application, using the IP logs and forged POA you provided. That file has been turned over to the Bellevue Police Department and the appropriate federal authorities. The bank will be seeking full restitution. They weren't just my allies. They were now the lead prosecutors. They were coming for Grant's IP address and Martin's signature. The media, as I'd anticipated, was not far behind. The local blogger, the one who had spoken to Frank, the contractor, was energized. The red tag, The sheriff's visit, the parade of officials. It was the biggest story of the month. His blog post, Dispute Halt's Luxury Renovation, was now the #1 topic in the community forums. He called me. I was prepared. "Ms. Lawrence, I'm just trying to get your side of the story," he said. "Your family is saying this is a terrible misunderstanding, that you're being cold and heartless." "I have no comment on any personal matters," I said, my voice perfectly neutral, exactly as Miles and I had rehearsed. "This is a legal matter involving unauthorized construction and significant documented fraud." "Fraud? That's a strong word." "It is, and it's accurate. I am not a reporter, so I cannot give you a story, but I can, as a private citizen, provide you with matters of public record." I emailed him. I sent him 3 things. 1. A copy of the publicly filed, fraudulent building permit showing the fake LLC and the Camila L. signature. 2. A copy of the official, red-tagged stop work order. 3. A copy of Inspector Henderson's official 5-count violation report. I gave him no emotion. I gave him no narrative. I gave him the unassailable, bureaucratic truth. The story he published that evening was a bombshell. The narrative was completely reset. The headline was, "Fraud, Forgery, and Fire Hazards. County documents reveal truth behind Salish Point stop work order." The story was no longer about a family spat. It was about a forged signature. It was about a fake company. It was about a 60-amp breaker that could have burned the cabin to the ground. It was about a load-bearing wall. My neighbor, Mr. Delaney, the retired fisherman, was quoted. "I knew something was wrong from the start. They were getting deliveries of materials at 10 o'clock at night, dropping them in the dark. You don't do that if you're on the level. The young woman who owns that place, Ms. Lawrence, she runs a tight ship. This wasn't her. This was something else." The community's perception flipped overnight. The comments on the blog, which had previously been sympathetic to Brielle, turned hard. "This isn't a dream home. It's a crime scene. Who forges a permit? I hope she sues them for every penny." Brielle, predictably, couldn't stand the loss of the narrative. She did the only thing she knew how to do. She ran to Facebook with more emotion. "You're all believing her lies," she posted, a desperate, rambling wall of text. "It's all paperwork. Just a silly paperwork mistake. She's twisting it to make us look like criminals. We are a family. She is destroying us over a wall. She has a penthouse. She has everything, and she's doing this to us. Her own blood. It's evil." But the magic was gone. The emotional currency was spent. The first comment on her post wasn't from a sympathetic aunt. It was from a stranger. "But did you forge the signature? Yes or no?" A second one. "The county inspector found 5 major hazards. Are you saying the county is lying too?" A third. "If it was a paperwork mistake, why did you file it under a fake company name? And why did you get a $9,000 kickback? The bank records are in the blog post." Brielle was finally, fatally, exposed. Her emotional theater had been obliterated by a single, boring, verifiable fact: the IP address. This was when the real panic set in. Grant was the first to break. He was the one who had physically typed the application. He was facing the bank's fraud case. He did what Miles had predicted. He hired a lawyer, a cheap, aggressive criminal defense attorney. Miles knew the man. "He's a plea bargain specialist," Miles told me, his voice dry. Grant must be terrified. The lawyer called Miles. It was a short, probing conversation. Did we really have the IP logs? Yes. Did we have the notarized affidavit from the neighbor? Yes. Did we have the bank's cooperation? Yes. Grant's lawyer must have given him the unvarnished truth. He wasn't in a family dispute. He was a defendant in a multi-count felony investigation. The emotional contribution he'd claimed as a defense was laughable. He was facing real, actual prison time for bank fraud. Grant went silent. His social media, usually a stream of inspirational hustle quotes, went dark. But it was my father's silence that was the most profound. "Martin, the man of bluster, the man of rage and justifications, the man who had screamed, "I paid for your education," disappeared. He didn't call me to rage. He didn't call to bargain. He didn't text. I knew what this meant. Grant was panicking. Brielle was melting down. But Martin? Martin was thinking. He was processing the new landscape. He was calculating the angles of his own survival. The fines, the remediation costs, the lawsuits. He was looking at total financial annihilation. The silence from my father was the most alarming development of all. Martin Lawrence always had a justification, always had a roar of indignation. His silence was not remorse. It was the sound of a man scanning the battlefield, looking for a new strategy, a new angle, or, most likely, a new scapegoat. The silence that followed the meeting was a new kind of weapon. My family's campaign of emotional warfare, their public postings and private guilt-tripping, had ceased abruptly. They were silent. It was the terrified silence of amateurs who had just been read their rights, who had suddenly realized their emotional drama was being translated into criminal code. Grant, who was facing the bank's federal fraud case, was silent. Brielle, who was facing a civil suit from Harborline and a public humiliation from the blog, was silent. And my father, the most dangerous of all, was utterly, unnervingly silent. But the world they had agitated was not. The pieces I had pushed were now all moving toward me, a chain reaction of consequences. The first to flip was the one with the most to lose. My phone rang on Tuesday, an unknown number. "Ms. Lawrence?" The voice was strained, broken. "It's Dave Miller, from Harborline." I did not speak. I waited. "My insurance carrier is dropping me," he said, his voice cracking. "The state licensing board has opened an investigation based on your engineer's report. I'm ruined. I'm going to lose my business." "You have the offer from my attorney, Mr. Miller," I said, my voice flat. "Immunity from my civil suit in exchange for your full cooperation." "Yes, ma'am. I'll take it. I'll sign anything. I have more." "More?" It was the daughter, Brielle. He sounded desperate to offload the information. "Your father. He was the one who signed my contract. But she was the one on site. She was the one pushing my crew. Frank, my supervisor, he has emails from her." "I'll need those emails, Mr. Miller." "He's forwarding them now. She was relentless, telling him to push faster, to cut corners on the waterproofing because the visuals were more important. And she set a deadline. She said they had to be done by the 1st of next month." "Why?" "I'm looking at the email now," he said, his voice trembling with anger. She wrote, "We have to push faster. I'm planning my new home announcement party. The catering is already booked." I saved the email. It was the final, definitive proof of intent. Not just a plan to take the cabin, but a publicized celebration of its theft. "Thank you, Mr. Miller," I said. "You have made a wise decision. My attorney will be in touch to draft your affidavit." The next piece came from the bank. Sharon, the investigator, called me. She sounded, for the first time, grimly satisfied. "Ms. Lawrence, one final clarifying detail for your file. Our team was reviewing the fraudulent HELOC application. It was thin. Our automated risk models flagged it for low liquidity in the Shell LLC's account. It almost didn't get approved." "Almost?" "Yes, it was approved because a last-minute $5,000 cash deposit was made into the LLC's new account to offset risk. The applicant was told the file needed more substance." "A cash deposit," I repeated. My mind was already there. "Yes, made at our Bellevue branch ATM. And we, of course, have the security footage from the ATM. It was your brother, Grant Lawrence. At 2:15 p.m. on the day before the loan was funded. It's a very clear shot. He's wearing a baseball cap. But it's him, shoving $5,000 in cash into the machine to legitimize the very loan he was using to defraud us." My breath caught. Grant hadn't just filed the paperwork. He had actively funded the conspiracy. He had knowingly paid cash to bypass the bank's security protocols. He was not just an accomplice. He was a primary, active conspirator. "Please send that footage to Miles Ortega," I said, "and to the Bellevue police." The third domino was the notary. Miles handled this one personally. He'd filed a formal complaint with the Secretary of State, which was all it took. "She folded," Miles reported to me, his voice dry. "The investigator visited her at the supermarket. She's a single mother, terrified of a felony charge and losing her commission. She signed a full confession." "And?" "She admitted everything. She never saw you. She never spoke to you. She did not witness your signature. She said your father, Martin, came in on a busy afternoon, all smiles, said his daughter was stuck in surgery, and he was just helping with some family paperwork. He charmed her. She knew him as a regular. It was just a little favor." She stamped the pre-signed document. It was perfect. The fraudulent POA was now legally dead, void from its inception, and the testimony of the notary placed the entire conspiracy, the pen, the paper, and the charm, directly in my father's hand. With the contractor, the bank, and the notary all aligned with my case, there was only one variable left, the weakest link, the source of the key. My mother? She called me, weeping, from a blocked number. "Camila, oh God, Camila, I need to see you. Please, just don't tell your father." We met in a place of perfect neutrality, a Starbucks in a strip mall, halfway between our two worlds. She looked like a ghost. She was pale, shaking, her eyes darting to the door every time the bell chimed. "They're going to take the house," she whispered, not even touching the tea I'd bought her. "Our house, the lawyers, the bank, they sent letters. They're talking about seizing assets, to pay for the fraud, to pay for the cabin." "Yes," I said, "that's what happens." "He told me it was just a renovation," she cried, her voice cracking. "He said you'd agreed. He's been so angry. Camila, ever since you took over the finances, he's been obsessed. He kept saying he had to fix things, to reclaim what was his." "I know." "No." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "You don't." She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small, black, leather-bound notebook, Martin's journal. He was a man of arrogant habits, and writing down his genius plans was one of them. She slid it across the table. Her hand was shaking violently. "He's a fool," she whispered, "and he's dragged us all down with him. I can't go down with him. I can't be homeless." I opened the notebook. My father's precise, arrogant script filled the pages. It was all there, a meticulous, month-by-month plan. Plan to reclaim family assets. Step 1. Form the LLC. Lawrence Family Renewal. Perfect name. Renewal. Rebirth. Step 2. Grant handles the digital side. He's good at that, and it keeps my hands clean. Step 3. Get the POA. The notary at the market will do it. She's a friend. Step 4. Brielle is the face. She'll handle the design. Her emotional need will be the perfect leverage. Camilla will fold when she cries. And then, the final, chilling entry, the one that sealed his fate. The LLC is the firewall. It will own the cabin. When Camilla sues, she sues a shell company with no assets. We drain the HELOC, finish the job, and transfer the LLC to Brielle, a perfect, clean way to get around her control. The cabin becomes Brielle's, legally, and I win. I closed the notebook. It was a complete, signed confession of his entire conspiracy. I looked at my mother. Her terror was real, but it was the terror of self-preservation, not remorse. "He planned to use you," I said, my voice quiet. "He planned to use Grant's technical skills, Brielle's emotional need, and your key, all as shields for himself." "What's going to happen to me?" she whispered. I reached into my briefcase. I did not pull out a tissue. I pulled out an envelope. I slid it across to her. She opened it. It was not a legal document from Miles. It was a one-page letter from me. It outlined, in clear, concise terms, an offer, a fully funded, post-nuptial separation agreement. It detailed relocation assistance to a 2-bedroom apartment of her choice and a living stipend to cover her expenses for 24 months. "It is conditional," I said, as she stared at the paper, her eyes wide. "It is conditional on your full and immediate separation from Martin's legal and financial life, and your full, truthful cooperation as a witness." She looked up. Her weeping stopped. A way out?" "He's sinking," I said. "You can be tied to his ankle, or you can be on the lifeboat. You have until the hearing to decide." She clutched the letter to her chest, stood up, and walked out of the coffee shop without another word. The final ally had flipped. The last dominoes fell quickly. Miles received an irate, sputtering email from a Seattle attorney representing Pink Haven Interiors, LLC, the Danish design firm, the real one, had sent them a cease and desist letter for blatant copyright infringement. They were demanding a 5-figure licensing fee or threatening a federal lawsuit. Brielle's friend, and by extension Brielle, was now facing a new, international legal battle. The board was set. Every piece was in my control. "It's time," I told Miles. "Schedule the hearing." He filed the request with the county, a formal hearing to review the code violations, the penalties, and the remediation plan. It was a simple municipal hearing, but I was inviting everyone, my family, and their new, terrified lawyers, the bank's legal team, the contractor, the former notary. But I made one last move. I was done with letters. I was done with threats. I wanted a legal wall. Miles filed a petition for a temporary restraining order, not for violence, for harassment, fraud, and theft. A judge, upon reviewing the stack of evidence, the forged POA, the bank fraud report, the IP logs, granted it immediately. Martin, Grant, and Brielle were served. They were now legally barred from contacting me. They were barred from my office. They were barred from my penthouse. And they were barred from coming within 500 feet of my cabin. The last of their power, the power to emotionally terrorize me, was gone. They were all lawyered up, just as Miles had predicted, 3 separate, panicked attorneys, and they were all turning on each other. Grant's lawyer wanted to blame Martin. Brielle's lawyer wanted to claim she was a vulnerable pawn of both Grant and Martin. And Martin's lawyer, the most expensive one, was the one who was silent. He'd seen the notebook. He'd seen the ATM footage. He'd seen the notary's confession. He knew his client was the architect, and he knew that all the exits were locked. The municipal hearing room was not a courtroom. It was a beige, windowless box with fluorescent lights that hummed, designed for zoning disputes and budget reviews. It smelled of stale coffee and bureaucratic apathy. I sat at a table with Miles. Across the narrow aisle sat my family, a fractured, toxic row. Grant, his face ashen, with a panicked, overworked lawyer. Brielle, her eyes red and puffy, her own attorney looking bored and annoyed, and my father, Martin, in his best suit, his jaw set, his expensive lawyer whispering constantly in his ear. In the back row, alone, sat my mother. She looked small, clutching the handbag that held the separation agreement I had offered. The bank's representative, Mr. Cole, was there. The now suspended notary was there, weeping quietly. The county prosecutor, a sharp woman, watched all of us. Inspector Henderson sat at the front, ready to testify. The chairperson, a woman with tired eyes, called the meeting to order. "We are here to review the violations and penalties regarding permit 5499B property at 1412 Salish Point Road." She looked at me. "Ms. Lawrence, as the property owner, you may speak." I stood. I did not look at my family. I addressed the chairperson. Miles switched on the projector. My flowchart, the timeline of fraud, filled the wall. "This is not a family disagreement," I began, my voice clear and cold, echoing slightly in the quiet room. "This is a documented, multi-stage, coordinated fraud. I am here to present the facts." I was in my element. This was my boardroom. This was my job. The timeline begins with the leveraging of a spare key, provided for emergencies only, to gain access. It proceeds to the creation of a fraudulent power of attorney, which my father, Martin Lawrence, procured by deceiving a public notary. The notary let out a small sob. Using that forged document, my brother, Grant Lawrence, filed for a fraudulent building permit under a shell corporation, Lawrence Family Renewal, LLC. He filed this from his personal IP address, which we have logged. Grant sank lower in his chair. Simultaneously, that forged POA was used to secure a $50,000 home equity line of credit from a national bank. My signature was forged on the application. This is bank fraud. Mr. Cole, the banker, nodded grimly. The funds were then dispersed. A portion went to a contractor, Harborline Build Co., who was deceived into believing my father was the owner. A second portion, a design fee of over 20%, was paid to Pink Haven LLC. This was a kickback. Bank records show those funds were immediately transferred to my sister, Brielle Lawrence. This is wire fraud. Brielle's lawyer put a hand on her arm to stop her from reacting. The construction itself, authorized by my father, was negligent, hazardous, and structurally compromised my home, as detailed in the engineer's report, and the intent, documented on social media and in emails, was to permanently seize my property for their own use, referring to it as Brielle's new home. I finished. This was not a mistake. It was a conspiracy. Thank you. I sat down. The room was utterly silent. The chairperson nodded, her face grim. Inspector Henderson. Henderson stood. He was all business. The violations are severe. The electrical work is a fire trap. The structural integrity is gone. This property is currently uninhabitable. The county requires a full demolition of all non-compliant work and a complete restoration to code, at the expense of the permit filer. We must maintain the stop work order indefinitely until this is certified. Mr. Cole, the chairperson said. The banker stood. The bank's investigation confirms the digital forensics. The HELOC application and the permit were filed from the same device, registered to Mr. Grant Lawrence. Furthermore, he added, his voice dripping with contempt, our security division has ATM footage of Mr. Grant Lawrence making a $5,000 cash deposit into the Shell LLC account, an act of material misrepresentation to bypass our risk protocols. We have turned our full file over to the district attorney's office and will be pursuing all criminal charges for bank fraud. This was new information, even to me. Grant made a small, strangled sound. His lawyer's face went from pale to white. The notary's testimony was brief and tearful. She admitted she had violated her oath, that Martin had charmed her, that she had stamped the document without seeing me. The prosecutor took notes, and the chairperson officially referred her case to the district attorney. Then, Martin's lawyer stood. He was slick, expensive. Madam Chair, my client, Mr. Lawrence, deeply regrets this. This overexuberant, misguided attempt to help his family. He acted not out of malice, but out of a father's love. Martin shoved his lawyer's arm off. He stood, his face mottled red. His mask of control shattered. He was not the powerful patriarch. He was the defendant. Please, he boomed, his voice cracking. He looked at me, his eyes wild with desperation. She's my daughter. This is my family. You can't do this. You can't send your own father. This is for family. His voice broke on the last word, the word he had used as a shield, as a hammer, as a crowbar his entire life. Camila, please, he begged. Don't do this. I made a mistake. A terrible, terrible mistake. But family doesn't do this. I let the silence stretch. I let his final, pathetic plea hang in the air and die. Then I stood. I looked at the chairperson. Mr. Chairman, my father is correct about one thing. This is a family matter, and as the primary victim, I am proposing a private, civil settlement. It is in lieu of my supporting the state's criminal prosecution. It is my final offer. It is non-negotiable. Miles stood and, with perfect practiced movements, handed a single-page document to each of the 3 defense attorneys. I laid out the terms, my voice cutting through my father's desperate breathing. Yes, you will all sign a full, legally binding confession, admitting to the forgery, the identity theft, the conspiracy to commit fraud, and the trespass. 2. You will repay every cent, the $50,000 in fraudulent funds, the $150,000 in estimated remediation and restoration costs, the full, itemized amount of my legal fees. You will pay it on a strict 24-month repayment plan. My attorney will be placing liens on your assets, including your homes, until it is paid in full. 3. You will sign a permanent, binding consent decree that functions as a restraining order. You will never again contact me, my office, or any of my associates. You will never again come within 1,000 feet of my properties. You will never again borrow, or attempt to borrow, money from me or in my name. The Bank of Camila is permanently closed. I looked at Brielle. And 4. You will delete every social media post, every comment, and every picture related to this entire affair. You will then post one single, public retraction, drafted and approved by my attorney, admitting that your claims of ownership were false, that your actions were unauthorized, and that you apologize for the deception. I looked back at the chairperson. They sign these 4 points, and I will inform the district attorney that I am satisfied with the civil remediation. They refuse, and I will join Mr. Cole and the state of Washington in recommending the maximum possible criminal sentences for all of them. They have 5 minutes. It was a rout. I could hear the whispers. Brielle's lawyer. Sign it. Just sign it. The copyright suit from the Danish firm will bankrupt you anyway. This is a gift. Grant's lawyer. He just pointed at Mr. Cole, the banker, and mouthed 2 words. ATM, footage. Grant, shaking, grabbed the pen. Martin's lawyer looked at my father. He had seen the notebook. He had seen the notary's confession. He had seen the affidavits. He simply pushed the document in front of Martin and slid the pen beside it. There was no defense. The architect was trapped in his own design. Miles brought the signature pages to my table. Grant signed. His hand so slick with sweat he smudged the paper. Brielle signed, her hot tears dripping onto the page, blurring her own name. Martin was the last. He picked up the pen. The man who had called me poison, the man who had built an empire of entitlement, the man who had told me he'd paid for my education and I owed him. His hand was shaking violently. He could barely form the letters. He signed his confession. At that moment, my mother, Diane, walked up behind me. She was quiet. She reached into her purse and pressed the cold, familiar spare key into my palm. "Camila," she whispered, I'm so sorry. For the key. For all of it." I closed my fist around the metal. I didn't look at her. "I know." The chairperson banged her gavel. "The civil agreement is noted. The county's order stands. Fines are levied. The 14-day remediation order is in full effect. This hearing is closed." I walked out. I did not look back. Miles handled the collection, the liens, the garnished accounts. He was, as always, mercilessly efficient. The next day, I hired a new crew, not a construction crew, a restoration crew, artists. I gave them one instruction. Erase it. Erase all of it. Take it back to the studs. I want every trace of them gone. I paid them to work around the clock. They tore out the hazardous wiring. They ripped out the gaudy, gold-plated tub. They tore down the cheap, porous white tile, the mold already blooming behind it. They tore out the Hollywood vanity. It was a cleansing, a structural exorcism. Weeks later, I drove back. The stop-work order was gone, replaced by a final certificate of occupancy. I stood at the front door. A locksmith was finishing his work. He handed me a new set of keys. Solid brass. They felt heavy, solid, and new. I watched him drive away. I walked inside. The cabin smelled of fresh cedar, new paint, and pine-scented floor wax. It smelled like mine. I took the new spare key. I did not put it under a mat. I did not give it to a relative for emergencies. I walked to the utility closet, where a new, small, fireproof safe was bolted to the studs. I spun the combination, a number no one on earth knew but me. I opened the heavy steel door, dropped the key inside, and clicked it shut. I stood in the center of my living room. My phone was on the kitchen counter. It was silent. It had been for weeks. No raging texts from Martin. No sobbing. Manipulative voicemails from Brielle. No big idea emails from Grant. I looked out the window. The sun was setting, casting long shadows through the tall pines. The only sound was the wind, moving through the trees. It was the sound of a border, finally, and forever, secured. Thank you for listening, and please comment below with where you're tuning in from. Subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button so more people can hear this story.